On June 30th, 2019, Austin Howell, a fearless and widely respected free solo climber, set out for another daring climb at Shortoff Mountain in North Carolina's Linville Gorge. Known for his ascents without ropes or harnesses, Austin approached the day with the same intensity and purpose that defined his life. But by late morning, that mountain bore witness to a tragic fall that would claim the life of a climber who never played it safe. Austin wasn't someone who blended in. Born in Friendswood, Texas, he discovered climbing at 19 while attending the University of Houston. Almost immediately, it became more than a hobby. It was his obsession, his therapy, his calling. In 2008, he survived a 35-foot fall at an indoor climbing gym that fractured multiple bones and vertebrae and left him with a traumatic brain injury. That injury would become a lifelong battle, affecting his mood and mental health. But instead of pulling away from the sport, Austin leaned in harder. Climbing became the thing that helped him quiet the noise in his head. Eventually, he left college to pursue climbing full-time and fully embraced free soloing, climbing sheer rock faces with no safety equipment whatsoever. His skill was remarkable and his commitment unmatched. He would often complete dozens of climbs in a single day, choosing routes that would terrify even seasoned professionals. To Austin, this wasn't about recklessness, it was about clarity. Climbing stripped life down to its purest form, one move at a time. That Sunday, photographer Ben Wu joined Austin as he tackled familiar routes like Dopey Duck and Golden Rule. After Ben left, Austin continued on. Witnesses later saw him near the steepest part of a tough climb, possibly the route known as Energizer. Dressed in his signature tie-dye and cap, Austin made a dynamic move toward a flake, a risky maneuver by any standard. Suddenly, something went wrong. A scream cut through the air. He fell 80 feet. Climbers Collins and Massey rushed to the scene, rappelling down to reach him. Massey tried CPR, but the injuries were catastrophic. Emergency responders arrived about 90 minutes later and pronounced him dead around 1:30 p.m. Officials would later describe that section of the mountain as extremely technical, where even the slightest mistake or a broken hold could prove fatal. For those who knew him, the shock of his death came with a haunting familiarity. His mother, Terry Zinga Jackson, had long feared this outcome, especially after his earlier injuries, which doctors said compromised his balance and hearing. But Austin was relentless. He'd even cut off his neck brace and casts to get back on the rock within weeks of recovery. Through his blog and social media, Austin didn't just showcase climbs, he shared his soul. He spoke candidly about mental health, risk, and the fragile balance between passion and danger. Life is an inherently dangerous sport, he often said, a mantra that summed up how he lived. Tributes poured in from climbers across the world. To them, Austin wasn't just a climber, he was a mentor, a friend, and a symbol of unapologetic, raw courage. On September 28, 2012, a routine Fox News broadcast took a shocking turn that would leave a lasting mark on American television history. What started as coverage of a high-speed police chase in Phoenix, Arizona, ended in a tragedy that millions of viewers would never forget. That morning, 33-year-old Jodan Romero, already wanted for a parole violation, stole a car at gunpoint in a Phoenix parking lot. Police quickly began pursuit. Romero raced through city streets, running red lights and putting countless lives at risk. The danger escalated further when he opened fire at officers and even aimed his gun at a news helicopter following overhead. To avoid putting more people in harm's way, police pulled back, using unmarked cars and aerial surveillance to track him. Eventually, Romero drove out of the city and into the Arizona desert. Around this time, Fox News had picked up the live feed, broadcasting the chase to millions. As viewers watched, Romero abandoned his vehicle on a dusty road and began walking aimlessly through the desert. In the studio, anchor Shepard Smith grew increasingly uneasy. "This scares me," he said on air, sensing something was about to go wrong. Then it happened. Without warning, Romero stopped walking, pulled out a handgun and took his own life on live television. In the Fox News control room, panic erupted. Smith, realizing what was happening, yelled, "Get off! Get off! Get off!" assuming the broadcast delay would give producers time to cut the feed. But the delay didn't work. The footage aired unfiltered. Millions of viewers saw it happen in real time. Moments later, the feed cut to commercial. When Smith returned, he was visibly shaken. He apologized directly to viewers, saying, "We really messed up and we're all very sorry." Fox News later issued a public statement, calling the incident a severe technical and human error. But for Romero's family, especially his children, the damage was irreversible. Romero had 3 kids, ages 9, 13, and 15. They were at school when rumors started spreading about the broadcast. After school, the older boys searched online and discovered the footage. At first, they didn't recognize the man. Then came the horrifying realization. They had just watched their father die. The emotional impact was devastating. Neither boy returned to school. They suffered from nightmares, flashbacks, and deep emotional trauma. Their mother, Angela Rodriguez, later described how their mental health rapidly deteriorated after seeing the footage. She took legal action against Fox News, arguing that their negligence had exposed her children to unimaginable harm. The broadcast ignited national outrage. Critics questioned why such dangerous situations were being aired live with so little oversight. Police chases had long been used to boost ratings, but now the cost was clear. Viewers, especially children, had seen something they never should have. Romero's actions that day were undeniably serious, but the way his life ended, broadcast without warning, sparked a larger debate. How far should news coverage go? What are the responsibilities of media in moments of crisis? For Romero's family, the loss was deeply personal. For the media, it was a wake-up call. And for viewers, it was a moment that can never be unseen. On a summer Sunday in Yellowstone National Park, the tranquility of the wild was suddenly disrupted by a clash between man and beast. A 47-year-old visitor from Cape Coral, Florida, approached a bison, an act that, though common among curious tourists, often comes with serious consequences. The massive animal, feeling threatened, responded swiftly and powerfully, goring the man. He was left with minor injuries and quickly treated by emergency medical personnel. While he survived the incident, it marked yet another reminder of the dangers that lurk behind Yellowstone's breathtaking beauty. This was the first bison-related injury of the year, but the fourth since 2023. The pattern is as troubling as it is predictable. In a place where nature reigns supreme, the rules are simple. Keep your distance, respect the wildlife, and never assume safety in close proximity to animals that, despite their seemingly slow pace and docile appearances, are still wild at heart. The recent incident adds to a growing list of unfortunate encounters. Just last year, an 83-year-old woman from South Carolina found herself on the wrong end of a bison's horns after getting too close. The force of the animal lifted her nearly a foot off the ground, leaving her with serious injuries. A few months earlier, a man under the influence of alcohol had harassed a herd and even kicked one of the bison, a reckless act that ended, unsurprisingly, in him being injured. There was also the tragic case of a newborn bison calf that paid the price for human interference. A man, perhaps believing he was helping, touched and disturbed the calf. As a result, the young animal was rejected by its herd. Park officials, unable to reintroduce it safely, had no choice but to euthanize it. The man was later convicted of disturbing wildlife, a charge that speaks volumes about the importance of boundaries in the park. Yellowstone is not just another national park, it's a living museum of American wildlife, home to the largest population of bison on public land in the country. These animals are survivors, symbols of a species that once teetered on the brink of extinction. In the late 1800s, bison were hunted so aggressively that their numbers plummeted from an estimated 30 million to fewer than 1,000. The devastation was not accidental. Historians and researchers agree that U.S. government policies encouraged the slaughter, in part to disrupt the lives of Native American tribes that depended on the bison for sustenance, clothing, tools, and shelter. By 1902, only about 24 bison remained in Yellowstone. What followed was a century-long conservation effort that stands today as one of the most celebrated triumphs in American environmental history. Thanks to careful management and strict protections, Yellowstone's bison population has rebounded dramatically. Today, over 5,000 of these majestic animals roam the park's valleys and grasslands, often crossing into neighboring parts of Montana. Despite this success, the bison's resilience comes with a cautionary tale. They are not zoo exhibits, nor are they gentle giants. Bison can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and run at speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, 3 times faster than the average human. They are protective of their space, unpredictable, and highly responsive to perceived threats. Most injuries happen because visitors ignore warning signs, both literal and metaphorical, lured by the false belief that proximity equals safety. The National Park Service repeatedly urges visitors to keep at least 25 yards away from bison at all times. Still, each year brings new stories of people who cross the invisible line, sometimes for a photo, sometimes out of ignorance, and sometimes simply because they forget that Yellowstone isn't a petting zoo. It's a slice of the wild, preserved in all its raw, untamed glory. The man injured this year may have walked away with only minor wounds, but others haven't been so lucky. In October 2018, 29-year-old Jordan Grider, an experienced outdoorsman from Moriarty, New Mexico, set out on what would be his most ambitious journey yet. His plan? To camp alone through the brutal winter in northern Minnesota's remote Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment adventure. This was something Jordan had been preparing for his entire adult life. Jordan wasn't your average guy. He was the third of 6 brothers and had spent more than a decade mastering survival skills in the wilds of Kentucky and upstate New York. He didn't consider himself homeless. He said he had a home, but simply preferred to live outside. Off-grid living, self-reliance, and solitude weren't just hobbies for Jordan. They were his way of life. In September 2018, he celebrated his birthday with family. A month later, he headed into the Minnesota wilderness alone. He brought with him gear, supplies, and the mindset to survive one of the harshest winters in the U.S. His family, familiar with his independent streak, still couldn't help but worry. On October 8th, Jordan sent them a photo of a peaceful beaver pond near his chosen camp. It was the last time they'd ever hear from him. Later that month, Jordan's white truck was found parked near a locked gate along the Sioux Hustler Trail, packed with supplies. Local authorities, concerned by the lack of communication, began searching. But with winter closing in fast, conditions quickly became too treacherous to continue. The snow buried the trail and the truth. Then, in April 2019, as the snow finally began to melt, Conservation Officer Sean Williams stumbled across a haunting sight. On a remote, south-facing slope, he found a primitive campsite. A hammock hung under a green tarp. Blood stained the sleeping bag beneath it. A loaded 9mm Beretta pistol lay nearby, untouched. Around the camp, there were wolf tracks and scat, but no sign of Jordan. As the thaw continued, investigators uncovered more. Scattered across the area were fragments of Jordan's remains, 12 bones in total. His skull was never found. The scene offered more questions than answers. The campsite appeared hastily assembled. The tarp and hammock were intact, suggesting there hadn't been a struggle. The blood, however, told a different story. This was no minor injury. One theory suggested a wolf attack. His mother, Rebecca Grider, believed Jordan may have been ambushed in his sleep, but researchers, including wolf expert Thomas Gable, were skeptical. Fatal wolf attacks in Minnesota are virtually unheard of, and the condition of the campsite didn't align with the chaos such an attack would cause. Another possibility was a tragic accident. Jordan was known to keep his knives razor sharp. Some speculated he might have cut himself severely, perhaps while carving or shaving. Makeshift bandages were found near the tent, hinting at an attempt to treat an injury. but no bloody knife was ever located, and the sheer volume of blood in the hammock suggested the wound was far more than a small slip. Foul play officially ruled out, but the untouched gun and absence of defensive injuries left a sliver of doubt. Some even floated bizarre theories. Mythical creatures like Sasquatch or the Wendigo were mentioned online. These ideas stayed in the realm of speculation, never supported by evidence. In May 2019, Jordan's family visited the site. It was a somber journey. Rebecca noted that there were no wood shavings around the camp. Strange, since Jordan was always carving something. To her, this suggested he'd only spent one night there. Despite cadaver dogs and intensive searches, most of Jordan's remains were never found. The case was eventually closed, with no conclusive cause of death. But for those who knew and loved him, the mystery still lingers. Was Jordan the victim of nature, an accident, or something we may never understand? On August 23, 2010, what began as a peaceful morning in Manila, Philippines quickly spiraled into a national nightmare. A disgruntled former police officer named Rolando Mendoza hijacked a tourist bus in Rizal Park, holding 25 people hostage. Mendoza, 55, had been dismissed from the Philippine National Police months earlier over extortion charges he insisted were false. Desperate to clear his name and get his job back, Mendoza saw the hostage situation as his last shot at justice. But what started as a plea for reinstatement soon turned deadly. Inside that bus were 22 tourists from Hong Kong and 3 Filipinos, a driver, a tour guide, and a photographer. For 11 tense hours, the world watched as a standoff unfolded live on television. At first, things seemed somewhat under control. Negotiators managed to talk Mendoza into releasing several hostages. But as the day dragged on, his mood darkened. What pushed him over the edge was something he saw on the bus's TV. His own brother, Gregorio Mendoza, also a police officer, being arrested on live television. Gregorio had come to help calm the situation, but authorities suspected him of aiding the hijacking. Watching his brother taken away in handcuffs was the final straw. Mendoza snapped. The tension exploded into terror. One of the hostages, Mrs. Leong, would later describe how her husband had bravely tried to disarm Mendoza but was tragically killed. Through her heartbreak, she stayed strong, clinging to the hope of seeing her children again. As Mendoza's threats became more violent, the urgency to act grew. He warned over the radio that he had already harmed hostages and was prepared to kill more. Yet the police response was slow, confused, and ultimately disastrous. When the assault team finally moved in, things quickly went wrong. Mendoza, still watching the news coverage, was essentially getting a live feed of the police's every move. The media, without realizing it, had given him an edge. He fired shots as police tried to breach the bus, creating chaos and confusion. Officers hesitated, unsure how to proceed. They smashed windows, tried the back door, and retreated under fire. After hours of failed rescue attempts, snipers were finally ordered to take the shot. Mendoza was killed, but by then it was too late. 8 hostages had lost their lives. The survivors, some bleeding and in shock, stumbled out of the bus. Emergency responders rushed in, but the damage was already done. One of the most haunting moments came when the bus driver, Alberto Lubang, escaped and ran toward police, yelling that everyone was dead. His words hit like a gut punch and revealed just how badly the situation had spiraled out of control. The backlash was swift and fierce. In Hong Kong, where the victims were from, public outrage exploded. Families demanded justice. The Philippine government issued an apology, but tensions between the two regions simmered for years. A full investigation was launched, led by then Justice Secretary Leila de Lima, exposing one failure after another. It turned out the police had no real training in handling high-risk hostage scenarios. They missed key chances to neutralize Mendoza earlier. Worse still, the media's live coverage had unintentionally sabotaged the rescue effort. Several top officials were suspended or demoted, including Manila's police chief. The public demanded reforms, and they got some. New training programs were introduced, including a specialized tourist police unit. But for many, the changes came too late. The scars from that day still linger. Survivors and families continue to search for closure. The images from that day, the terrified faces, the broken glass, the heartbreak, remain etched into history. The Manila hostage crisis wasn't just a tragedy. It was a painful lesson in what can happen when preparation fails and desperation takes hold. Wildlife safaris offer a thrilling chance to witness nature in its rawest form, bringing people face to face with some of the world's most majestic creatures. But when safety guidelines are ignored or unpredictable moments arise, these adventures can take a dark and tragic turn. The following list explores 5 of the most disturbing and unforgettable deaths that occurred during wildlife safaris. What was meant to be a peaceful safari outing in Zambia turned into a tragic reminder of how unpredictable wildlife encounters can be. Juliana Glay Tourneau, a 64-year-old tourist from New Mexico, was visiting Zambia and took part in a guided safari near the Maramba Cultural Bridge in Livingstone. The group stopped as a herd of elephants crossed the road, a fairly common occurrence in the region and usually a highlight for many visitors. However, what happened next ended in tragedy. According to initial police reports, an elephant approached the vehicle and pulled Juliana out before fatally trampling her. But this version of events was later questioned by the Livingstone Tourism Association. In their statement, they clarified that the tourists had exited the vehicle, something strictly against national park rules. They emphasized that such an attack, where an elephant pulls someone from a vehicle, has never been reported before in Africa or Asia. Regardless of the exact circumstances, the incident has raised concerns and conversations around safari safety and the importance of following guidelines when observing wild animals. This was the second fatal elephant encounter involving a U.S. tourist in Zambia this year. Back in March, 79-year-old Gail Matson from Minnesota lost her life during a game drive in Zambia's Kafue National Park. In that case, a charging elephant flipped over the safari vehicle she was riding in. Gail died in the incident, and 5 others were injured. A video that later surfaced showed the elephant approaching quickly, with someone in the vehicle saying, "It's coming fast," just before the animal made contact. The vehicle tried to stop, but the elephant hooked it with its tusks and rolled it over. Gail's daughter later shared on Facebook that her mother had died in a tragic accident while on her dream adventure. In light of these events, Zambian authorities have reminded tourists and tour operators to exercise extra caution around wildlife. The core message is simple: wild animals, while incredible to observe, are still wild and unpredictable. Parks across Africa have clear rules to help keep visitors safe, like staying inside safari vehicles at all times and keeping a safe distance from animals. These rules aren't just for show. They're based on years of experience and observation. Zambia, along with neighboring countries like Zimbabwe and Botswana, is also seeing growing elephant populations. With that comes an increased risk of human-wildlife encounters, especially in areas where tourism is on the rise. It's worth noting that safaris are generally very safe when rules are followed and guides are respected. Thousands of people enjoy them every year without incident. However, these recent tragedies are a reminder of why safety protocols matter and why no photo or close-up look is worth risking a life. If you ever find yourself on a safari, remember, the experience is about observing and respecting wildlife in their natural habitat. Staying alert, following your guide's instructions, and keeping your distance are essential steps to ensuring a safe and memorable adventure. This incident, while heartbreaking, can help educate future visitors and reinforce the importance of responsible tourism, something that benefits both humans and the animals we travel so far to see. In the summer of 2019, Lucas Fowler and Chynna set off on what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. The couple, young and in love, were exploring the wild beauty of Canada together, armed with a sense of wonder, a restored van, and a deep passion for travel. But their journey, meant to celebrate life and connection, ended in tragedy. Lucas, 23, was from Sydney, Australia. He was the fourth child in a tight-knit family and had grown up outdoors, riding dirt bikes, camping, and soaking in every bit of adventure he could find. After backpacking around the world for 2 years, he met Chynna in Croatia. She was 24, from North Carolina, and just as adventurous as Lucas. The youngest in her family, Chynna was known for her kindness and curiosity. They bonded quickly over their shared love for life, exploration, and each other. After spending Christmas together in the U.S., Lucas returned to Canada, where he worked on a remote ranch. From there, they planned a 10-day road trip through British Columbia in Lucas's pride and joy, a restored 1986 blue Chevrolet van. They were chasing beauty, serenity, and freedom. On July 14th, they ran into some car trouble. Their van broke down along the Alaska Highway, about 20 kilometers south of Liard Hot Springs, a remote but scenic area in northern British Columbia. Despite the setback, they didn't let it ruin the moment. Passers-by later recalled seeing the couple smiling, sharing a picnic, and appearing relaxed as they worked on the van. They seemed carefree, in love, and totally in their element. But the next day, July 15th, everything changed. A highway worker named Trevor Pierre discovered their lifeless bodies in a ditch near the van. They were found about 5 meters apart, both with visible gunshot wounds. The back doors of their van were wide open and the windows had been smashed. It was immediately clear this was no accident. It was a brutal, cold-blooded double murder. Authorities struggled for 3 days to identify the victims because of the severity of their injuries. When their names were finally released, shockwaves rippled across Canada and around the world. Lucas's parents flew to Canada, heartbroken. His father, Stephen Fowler, a senior detective in New South Wales, was torn between his professional understanding of violent crime and the unbearable pain of losing his son. Chynna's family in North Carolina was devastated too, remembering her as joyful, kind, and full of light. As investigators dug deeper, the story took a chilling turn. Just 4 days after Lucas and Chynna were killed, the body of Leonard Dyke, a 64-year-old university lecturer, was discovered 470 kilometers away. His truck had been set on fire. The suspects? 2 teenagers, Con McLeod, 18, and Briar Schmigelski, 19, from Port Alberni, British Columbia. They had initially been reported missing but were quickly linked to all 3 murders. A massive manhunt followed, stretching across 3 provinces and capturing international media attention. The teens stole Dyke's car and drove it more than 3,000 kilometers east to Gillam, Manitoba. On August 7th, after weeks of searching, police found their bodies in the woods. Both had died by suicide. For Lucas and Chynna's families, the discovery offered closure, but no comfort. The randomness of the crime only made it more horrific. 2 vibrant young lives, full of promise, had been stolen without reason. At their funerals, Lucas and Chynna were remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived, boldly, lovingly, and together. Footage from a gas station days before their murder shows them smiling, embracing, and cleaning their van side by side. It's a heartbreaking yet beautiful final image of 2 souls doing what they loved, together. It was the evening of September 2nd, 2011, and millions of Chileans were tuned into Calle Siete, a popular game show, expecting another lighthearted night of entertainment. But suddenly, their screens went dark. A serious news anchor appeared, delivering a message that stunned the nation. A Chilean Air Force aircraft had disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. The plane, a Casa C-212, had been carrying 21 people, including beloved television host Felipe Camiroaga and journalist Roberto Bruce. It vanished near Robinson Crusoe Island, a remote spot far off Chile's coast. What started as a routine relief mission ended in one of the country's most heartbreaking tragedies. The aircraft had departed from Santiago earlier that day, part of a humanitarian effort to document reconstruction work after the devastating 2010 earthquake. The team from TVN, Chile's national broadcaster, was traveling to highlight how communities were rebuilding. On board were TV crew members, businessman Felipe Cubillos, and others dedicated to the cause. As the plane approached the island, the weather turned treacherous. Heavy rain and fierce winds made landing nearly impossible. The pilots aborted 2 landing attempts due to poor visibility. On their 3rd try, communication was lost. Minutes later, the plane vanished from radar. Rescue teams mobilized immediately. Local fishermen joined the search, combing the seas in hopes of finding survivors. But as hours passed and no one was found, hopes began to fade. The Chilean government soon confirmed the worst. There were no survivors. The loss was felt deeply across the country. Felipe Camiroaga wasn't just a TV host. He was a national icon. Known for his charm, generosity, and genuine warmth, he had become a fixture in Chilean households. His morning show Buenos Dias a Todos was a daily comfort to millions. The idea that he, and others like Roberto Bruce, were suddenly gone was unthinkable. Newsrooms were paralyzed. TVN colleagues struggled to continue broadcasting, breaking down on air. Across Chile, people gathered to mourn. Outside TVN headquarters, candles were lit, flowers laid, and tears flowed freely. Then came a haunting discovery. Among the wreckage, divers found a memory card, carefully sealed in a water bottle. It belonged to Romina Irarrázaval, a photographer who had been on the flight. Miraculously, the card survived. On it were 409 images, including 6 taken during the final moments. One showed the plane's cabin floor, another captured water rising against a window. Somehow, Romina had sensed what was coming and preserved a final glimpse of their journey. Investigators later concluded that sudden wind gusts and turbulence caused the plane to lose stability. It was flying low and slow, conditions that left little room for error. The aircraft crashed into the ocean, its wreckage scattered across the seafloor. The aftermath was devastating. Recovery efforts continued for months. Some victims' bodies were found, others never were, but the emotional toll had already been etched into the heart of the nation. The 2011 Casa C-212 crash wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a moment that united a grieving country. It took away familiar faces, voices that had comforted and inspired. Today, their memory still lingers, in the photos Romina left behind, in every tribute aired, and in the hearts of a country that will never forget. In May 2013, a tragic event unfolded at South Lakes Wild Animal Park in Dalton-in-Furness, a quiet area in South Cumbria. Sarah McClay, a 24-year-old keeper originally from Glasgow, lost her life in a horrifying encounter with one of the park's Sumatran tigers. Known for her dedication and experience working with big cats, Sarah had spent more than 2 years at the zoo, which she considered a privilege. However, on this day, a fatal failure in safety protocols turned her passion into tragedy. The tiger, named Padang, was able to escape through a series of unlocked and malfunctioning gates inside the tiger house. These gates were designed to keep the dangerous animals and their keepers separated at all times, featuring lockable, self-closing doors meant to prevent any accidental encounters. But a defective bolt on one of these gates failed to close properly, allowing the tiger to enter the corridor where Sarah was working. The attack was brutal and swift, leaving Sarah with multiple deep puncture wounds to her neck and body that were unsurvivable. Despite being airlifted to a hospital, she was pronounced dead shortly after the incident. The loss sent shockwaves through the community. Her colleagues and family, all of whom struggled to come to terms with the sudden and violent nature of her death. Following the incident, an inquest was held in Kendall, where a jury delivered a narrative verdict. They found that the tiger had gained access to Sarah by entering through 2 open sliding gates within the tiger house before moving through the door that led to the corridor. These lapses in security were not simply human error, but were tied to systemic problems with the zoo's safety systems, particularly the faulty door mechanism that failed to close securely. The zoo, which has since been renamed South Lakes Safari Zoo, admitted to breaching the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. It acknowledged that it had failed to ensure that people who were not staff were kept out of harm's way, and, crucially, that it had not addressed the risks associated with the defective door bolt prior to the attack. The case revealed a troubling picture of inadequate safety measures and poor risk management within the park. Legal proceedings culminated in a significant fine for the zoo, nearly £300,000, with £42,500 of this specifically related to another health and safety breach from July 2014, when a keeper fell from a ladder while preparing to feed the big cats. In addition, the zoo was ordered to cover £150,000 in prosecution costs over the next decade, underscoring the seriousness of its safety failings. David Gill, the zoo's owner, faced individual charges related to the same allegations, but was formally acquitted. Nonetheless, the burden of responsibility remained heavily on the zoo as an institution. Padang, the tiger involved in the fatal attack, was kept alive for some time after the incident, as Sarah's family requested that he not be put down. However, due to his age, the tiger was euthanized a year later, closing a difficult chapter for those involved. The judge overseeing the case made it clear that the tiger's ability to enter Sarah's workspace should never have been possible. He stated that the malfunctioning door mechanism was a substantial contributing factor that directly led to the tragedy. It was a predictable risk that the zoo had failed to mitigate, leading to fatal consequences. The aftermath of the incident saw Sarah's family grappling with immense grief and the painful process of healing. While the guilty plea from the zoo brought some measure of closure, it could not erase the loss or the sense of shock felt by those who loved her. Her family expressed a mixture of relief and vindication, as the case highlighted that the blame did not lie with Sarah, but rather with the zoo's unsafe working conditions. Sarah's brother was particularly vocal in pointing out that the zoo had been punished appropriately for its failures, and that it was fortunate the tragedy had not resulted in more loss of life. The case left the zoo at a crossroads. It needed to either implement serious improvements to safety measures or face the possibility of closure. This tragic story serves as a powerful reminder of the critical importance of rigorous safety standards in places that house dangerous animals. It highlights how even small oversights, like a defective bolt, can lead to devastating consequences. The loss of Sarah McClay, a dedicated and experienced keeper, underscores the human cost when safety is compromised. Her death remains a somber lesson in the responsibilities wildlife parks carry to protect those who work tirelessly to care for some of the world's most powerful creatures. In the early morning hours of July 6, 2021, the peaceful town of Ovando, Montana, nestled beside the Blackfoot River, became the scene of a chilling and tragic encounter. 65-year-old Leah Davis Loken, a retired nurse from Chico, California, met an apex predator face-to-face and sadly didn't survive. Leah was no stranger to adventure. She had a deep love for the outdoors and was known among her friends and family as a passionate cyclist. That summer, she set out on a long-distance ride along the Great Divide mountain bike route, a journey she had been planning for months. Her route took her through remote and scenic stretches of the American West, eventually bringing her to the tiny town of Ovando, population fewer than 100. It's known for its rustic charm, but more ominously, it's also on the edge of grizzly bear territory. The nearby Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex is home to nearly 1,000 grizzlies. Leah arrived in Ovando with her sister and a friend, and while they chose to stay at a nearby hotel for the night, Leah opted instead to camp outdoors. She pitched her tent behind the local museum, joined by a Texas couple camping nearby. At around 3 a.m., Leah and the other campers were jolted awake by the sounds of something large moving through the campsite. A grizzly bear, later weighed at 417 pounds, was right outside their tents. Leah could hear it breathing, hear the low, huffing sounds it made as it passed near her head. The group sprang into action, making noise to scare it off, and it worked. The bear vanished into the darkness. Cautious but calm, Leah took steps to reduce any attractants. She removed food items, packaged snacks and dry lentils, from her tent and placed them in a nearby building. She even kept bear spray close at hand before returning to her tent. When offered another chance to retreat to the safety of the hotel, Leah declined. The stars, the peace, This was the wilderness experience she loved, but she missed something. Inside her tent were 2 toiletry bags, ones she had previously used to store dried blueberries. The scent still lingered. Just 10 feet away, her bike held food in its saddlebags, yet another tempting aroma for a hungry bear. Less than an hour later, at about 4 a.m., the grizzly returned. This time, it didn't hesitate. The bear tore into Leah's tent and launched a brutal attack. The Texas couple awoke to the chaos. The man could see the bear pouncing on Leah's tent and desperately sprayed his bear deterrent, shouting to scare it off. But the damage had already been done. Leah was killed almost instantly, her neck broken and spine severed. Wildlife officials later concluded that the bear had likely been food conditioned, a dangerous behavior in which bears associate humans with food after scavenging garbage or campsites. It had likely targeted Leah because of the lingering food scents and her movements inside the tent. 3 days later, the same bear raided a chicken coop near Ovando. Wildlife agents tracked and euthanized it. DNA tests confirmed it was the same bear responsible for Leah's death. The tragedy sparked urgent conversations about outdoor safety in bear country. Investigators stressed the importance of proper food storage, eliminating scented items from tents, and always carrying and knowing how to use bear spray. Most importantly, they urged campers, if a bear approaches, don't just go back to sleep in the same spot. Move, seek shelter in a building or vehicle. Leah Davis Loken's death was heartbreaking and rare, but it serves as a powerful reminder. In bear country, the line between adventure and danger can be razor thin. It was December 14th, 1982 in Rio de Janeiro, a day that would go down as one of the most haunting in Brazilian television history. Maria Arenalda da Silva, just 23 years old, walked into a TV studio with her 9-month-old daughter, Danubia, cradled in her arms. The baby was critically ill, suffering from a rare eye condition that caused severe bleeding and pain. Maria had spent months begging hospitals for help. She went from Pedro Ernesto to Souza Aguiar and others in between, only to be turned away each time. No beds, no doctors, no answers. Her daughter was slipping away, and no one seemed willing or able to stop it. Desperate and out of options, Maria turned to television. She'd heard that a show called O Povo na TV sometimes featured real people's stories, often exposing injustice and corruption. The show was a popular mix of gritty reporting and sensationalism, hosted by big names like Wilton Franco, Wagner Montes, and Sergio Mamberti. It thrived on intense, emotional stories, and Maria hoped that maybe, just maybe, going on air could bring some help. She arrived at the studio around 11 a.m., anxiously waiting for the 1 p.m. live broadcast. When she was finally called to the stage at 1:40, Danubia's condition had gotten visibly worse. Holding her baby close, Maria told her story. She explained the countless rejections and the hospitals that kept shutting their doors. The hosts listened and criticized the failing healthcare system while the camera zoomed in, capturing Danubia's fragile face for the nation to see. But as Maria spoke, something tragic unfolded. Danubia was dying right there on live television. Viewers watched in disbelief as the baby's body grew still. Just 40 minutes into the broadcast, Danubia passed away in her mother's arms. But the show didn't stop. The hosts kept talking about hospital failures, about bureaucracy, about injustice. But for those at home, the unthinkable had just happened. They had witnessed a child's final breath on live TV. After the cameras finally cut, an ambulance arrived to take Danubia's body to the Forensic Medical Institute. Maria left the studio devastated, still holding her lifeless daughter. O Povo na TV continued with its usual programming as if nothing had happened. No pause, no moment of silence, no real acknowledgement of the tragedy that had just unfolded on their stage. The reaction was swift and furious. Just 3 days later, a major newspaper published a scathing editorial accusing the show of turning a real-life death into entertainment. The broadcast, many said, had crossed an ethical line. The outrage spread quickly. Viewers and critics alike were appalled that the show not only aired such a sensitive moment, but did so without stepping in, without compassion, without care. While O Povo na TV had always flirted with controversy, this moment became a breaking point. The show kept going for a while, but it never fully recovered. Then, in 1984, it was shut down for good, this time due to another scandal. One of its regular guests, Roberto Lenruber, who claimed to be a healer, was exposed for offering fake medical treatments on air. He and host Wilton Franco were both arrested for fraudulent medical practices. Even after the show ended, the memory of that day in 1982 lingered. Danubia's death remained one of the darkest moments in Brazilian broadcast history, not just for the loss, but for how it was handled. A mother's plea, a dying baby, and an audience who watched helplessly. Years later, Maria expressed mixed feelings. She was still grateful to Franco for giving her a platform when hospitals didn't. But for the rest of Brazil, the incident remains a powerful reminder of just how far is too far, especially when real lives are at stake. In June 2015, Catherine Chappell, a 29-year-old visual effects editor from New York, arrived in South Africa with a mission. She wasn't there as a typical tourist. Her goal was bigger, more purposeful, to spend 2 weeks volunteering at a wildlife sanctuary that focused on protecting endangered species like rhinos and elephants. With a camera in hand and a heart full of passion for animals and nature, she dreamed of eventually creating a documentary that would expose the horrors of animal poaching. For her, this trip was more than an escape. It was the beginning of something meaningful. Catherine had always lived with a deep sense of adventure. Her work in film had taken her across continents, from Europe to Japan, and more recently to Canada, where she had worked on major productions, including HBO's Game of Thrones. But as impressive as her professional journey was, it was her curiosity about the natural world and her drive to protect it that defined her most. On that fateful day, Catherine decided to take a break from her volunteering duties to experience one of South Africa's popular wildlife attractions, the Lion Park, just outside Johannesburg. The park offers visitors the rare opportunity to see lions up close from the safety of their vehicles. It's the kind of thrill that leaves a lasting impression, but with such proximity comes strict rules. Chief among them, never open your windows. Catherine joined a guided drive through the reserve, likely excited at the chance to get some clear photographs of the majestic animals she admired so much. The lions wandered freely within the park, used to the presence of humans and vehicles, but still very much wild at heart. At some point during the drive, her window was rolled down, just enough to allow her camera to capture the moment. What happened next was sudden and devastating. A lioness approached the vehicle. In a split second, the calm of the scene was shattered. The animal lunged through the open window and attacked. The driver, reportedly a local tour operator, tried to intervene and was seriously injured in the process. Despite the efforts, Catherine was fatally wounded. The attack shocked the world and made headlines across international media. It was a tragic end to a journey that had been filled with hope, compassion, and purpose. Officials at the Lion Park confirmed the attack and reiterated the importance of keeping vehicle windows closed at all times. Sadly, it was not the first such incident the park had seen. Earlier that year, an Australian tourist had been bitten by a lion under similar circumstances. A teenager had also been attacked by a cheetah after entering the park on a bicycle. Yet another reminder of how unpredictable and powerful wild animals can be. Following Catherine's death, the lioness involved in the incident was not euthanized, but was removed from public areas. The park reinforced its safety rules, emphasizing once again the line that separates humans from the wild, and how crucial it is not to cross it even with good intentions. Catherine's story became more than just a tragic headline. It served as a lesson on the thin line between admiration and intrusion when it comes to wildlife. She had come to South Africa to protect animals, to tell their story, and to help preserve their future. Ironically and tragically, her passion for that world brought her too close to it. Her family, friends, and those who followed her work remember her not only as a talented visual artist, but as someone who wanted to make a difference. Her journey, though heartbreakingly short, continues to inspire conversations about conservation, responsible tourism, and the wild beauty that, for all its wonder, still demands caution and respect. Catherine's legacy lives on as a reminder. When we enter the natural world, we are visitors, guests in a space that doesn't belong to us, and even the most noble intentions must be paired with awareness, humility, and care. The Red Valley of Peru is a place of stunning contrasts. Rolling hills painted in deep reds and lush greens, sculpted by mineral-rich soil and thousands of years of geological history. For nature lovers, it's a dream. For adventurers, a challenge. But in November 2024, for Gabriela Diana Basalo, it became the setting of an unimaginable tragedy. Gabriela, originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, was 32 years old. As a teenager, she moved to Santiago, Chile, where she built a full and vibrant life. She had a 10-year-old son and had recently married the love of her life, Samuel Sierra. A creative soul with a practical side, Gabriela had studied cosmetology and aesthetics and worked as a freelance makeup artist. At the same time, she'd been involved in logistics for a dried fruit company since 2020. Friends described her as spirited, artistic, and adventurous. In late October 2024, Gabriela and Samuel set off on a much-anticipated trip to Peru. Their goal, to take in the breathtaking sights, soak up the local culture, and challenge themselves with some real outdoor adventure. On November 1st, they joined a group hike to the Red Valley, a remote, high-altitude area near the famous Rainbow Mountain in the Pitumarca district. The Red Valley sits over 5,200 meters above sea level. It's beautiful, but not easy. The trails are rugged, the air thin, and the weather unpredictable. Still, the group pressed on, hiking through the alien-like terrain of the valley, surrounded by vivid red and green mountains that looked like something from another planet. As the day wore on and the group began their descent, the weather began to shift. What started as a light drizzle quickly turned to a mix of rain and snow. Conditions worsened rapidly. What Gabriela and Samuel didn't know was that a powerful storm was moving in fast. Then came the moment that changed everything. As the group continued down the mountain, a bolt of lightning suddenly struck. It hit Gabriela directly, killing her instantly. The force of the strike left her with severe burns and threw Samuel to the ground, injuring him. Their guide, Ephraim Zamora Galindo, acted quickly to alert authorities, but the worsening weather made rescue efforts nearly impossible. With snow and rain battering the mountainside, responders had no choice but to wait. Gabriela's body remained on the mountain overnight. The following morning, emergency crews reached the site and recovered Gabriela's remains. She was transported to the morgue in the town of Sicuani, near Cusco. Samuel was taken to the hospital for treatment. An investigation was opened, but the cause of death was tragically clear: a direct lightning strike, a rare and deadly hazard in high-altitude regions like the Red Valley. Shockingly, this was the second lightning-related death in Peru that month, underscoring just how dangerous the weather can be in these elevated landscapes. The region's beauty is deceptive. Beneath the painted hills lies a sky capable of turning deadly without warning. Back in Chile, the news of Gabriela's death devastated her family. Her sister, Florencia, expressed deep sorrow, sharing that she wished she had told Gabriela more often how much she loved her. The only comfort was knowing that Gabriela had spent her final days doing something she loved, with someone she loved, in a place she'd always dreamed of visiting. Gabriela's young son now faces a future without his mother, a heart-wrenching reminder of the risks hidden behind nature's most breathtaking scenes. Her story is a sobering example of how quickly beauty can turn to tragedy in the great outdoors. It was January 11th, 2001, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a day that was supposed to be filled with laughter and fun. On the set of Xuxa Park, one of the most beloved children's TV shows in the country, cameras rolled as Brazilian pop icon Xuxa Meneghel performed for a live audience of nearly 300 people, mostly excited kids. The set looked like a vibrant amusement park, with giant props, colorful rides, and playful characters. It was a world designed to delight, but everything changed in an instant. As Xuxa and her dancers performed the show's final musical number, a small fire broke out in one of the show's signature props, a large spaceship used for grand entrances. At first, it didn't seem serious. A crew member grabbed a fire extinguisher to put it out, but instead of dying down, the fire spread fast, feeding on the plastic decorations that covered the set. Within seconds, flames were everywhere. Thick black smoke filled the studio, making it almost impossible to see or breathe. Panic swept through the crowd. Parents, children, and crew members scrambled toward the exits, trying to escape the growing inferno. The intense heat began to melt parts of the set, and in the chaos, some children got trapped. One terrifying moment stood out. A young girl became stuck on a Ferris wheel prop. Xuxa's bodyguard, Leandro Nilsson, saw what was happening and didn't hesitate. He ran straight through the fire to rescue the girl, risking his own life to save hers. He managed to get her out, but the fire kept spreading. Despite the chaos, some cameras continued recording, capturing the disaster as it unfolded. That footage would later be broadcast across Brazil, shocking millions. By the time firefighters brought the blaze under control, the damage was overwhelming. A total of 26 people were injured, most from smoke inhalation. 2 children, aged 7 and 10, suffered severe burns. An adult who helped with the rescue efforts was also badly hurt. While no one died, the trauma was deep and lasting. The cheerful world of Xuxa Park had turned into a nightmare. Xuxa herself, though unharmed, was emotionally devastated. Known for her close connection with children, she was heartbroken by what had happened. In the days that followed, she visited the victims in the hospital, offering comfort and support. But the emotional toll was undeniable. Investigators later confirmed the fire was caused by an electrical short circuit in the spaceship prop. There was no foul play, just a tragic accident. Still, the impact was huge. Xuxa Park, which had been on the air since 1994, was immediately put on hold. Globo, the network behind it, decided to cancel the show for good. 8 unaired episodes were permanently shelved out of respect for those affected. The set was destroyed, and the magic that once filled it was gone. Xuxa never returned to children's television in the same way again. For the children in that audience, and the millions who watched her every weekend, Xuxa Park was more than a show. It was a piece of childhood. But after that day, it became a painful memory. No lives were lost, but the fire ended an era and left emotional scars that would last a lifetime. In the summer of 2017, Carol Sue Kirkin from Rochester Hills, Michigan, set out on what was meant to be a memorable family vacation to Tanzania. The plan was a classic African safari, a chance to explore the wild landscapes and experience nature's majesty up close. For Carol, 75 years old, this trip was more than just a holiday. It was an adventure, a celebration of life, and time spent with loved ones in a faraway land. Carol was no ordinary traveler. She was a woman known in her community for her kindness, strength, and dedication to helping others. As a founding member of the Rochester Area Women's Fund, she had spent years supporting initiatives aimed at empowering women. She also volunteered frequently at the North Oakland YMCA, where she worked to support military families. Her spirit was generous, and her impact deeply felt by those who knew her. This trip was, in many ways, a reflection of her adventurous soul, someone who embraced life fully and sought to create meaningful experiences wherever she went. The family's safari took place in the stunning landscapes of Tanzania, where wildlife roams free and the natural world reveals itself in spectacular ways. But what began as an exciting expedition quickly turned tragic. On August 5th, during a moment near the waterside, Carol was attacked by a hippopotamus, one of the continent's most powerful and unpredictable animals. The encounter was sudden and devastating, and despite the presence and efforts of her son, who was with her at the time, Carol succumbed to her injuries. She passed away in his arms, a heartbreaking end to a journey meant to celebrate life. News of Carol's death spread quickly through her hometown and beyond, leaving friends, family, and community members in shock. Those who knew her described her as a force of nature, someone who quietly inspired others through her actions rather than words. Her loss was felt deeply, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be, especially when faced with the raw unpredictability of the wild. In the aftermath, social media became a place where loved ones shared memories and offered condolences. Tributes poured in, speaking of Carol's warmth, her willingness to support others, and the way she took those around her under her wing. Many noted that she had a unique way of encouraging people to find their own path. She didn't dictate what to see or think, but helped others learn to look at the world through their own eyes. The tragedy also sparked conversations about the inherent risks involved in wildlife safaris. While safaris offer unforgettable encounters with nature, they also come with dangers that can't be ignored. Hippos, despite their seemingly slow and docile appearance, are among Africa's most aggressive animals, responsible for more human fatalities than many other species. Carol's death underscored the importance of vigilance and respect for wildlife behavior, reminding travelers that even the most seasoned adventurers are vulnerable in the wild. Her passing was not just a loss to her family, but also to the community she served so passionately. Carol left behind her husband, Bill, their 3 children, and 5 grandchildren. The legacy she built through her volunteer work and her genuine care for others remains alive, continuing to inspire those who carry her memory forward. Carol Sue Kirkin's story is a poignant mix of adventure and tragedy. It's a tale that highlights the beauty and unpredictability of the natural world, and the importance of approaching it with both wonder and caution. It also tells of a life well lived, a woman who embraced every moment with generosity and courage, leaving behind a legacy that reaches far beyond the boundaries of her own life. Her journey to Africa was meant to be a celebration, a time of connection with family and nature, but it also became a solemn reminder of how quickly things can change when the wild asserts its power.